so. But I'd like to ask you about the 6th grade academy. Given the skepticism that you had expressed toward alternative grade configurations in some of the other meetings that I've attended, I was surprised to see a 6th grade academy appear as part of your plan for Inman, especially one that was going to, in effect, be a standalone school, given the distances between Inman and the site that, at least initially, was under consideration. As a side note, I hope backing off of using that school for an Inman annex is just the first step toward repurposing that school back to its original purpose, that is, the middle school. But back to the 6th grade academy, if I may, I'd like to ask about best practices. What school systems use this particular grade configuration or model? What advantages will this configuration present us, and what preconditions are necessary for this sort of model to be a success? And in particular, if I may ask you to address transportation issues in particular, since sending 6th graders all around town is already going to be kind of a difficult thing for those kids. Thank you.
Okay. Let me say first that I get a lot of questions that fall just a tad short of send me all the research sites, send me all the research. I have the capability to analyze this. I want to come to my own conclusion. We're not breaking any new ground here. We're not reinventing. This is not a new reform model. They have them in Marietta. They have them around us. I don't have a list of every school in the country that's doing it, but again, the difference between a 6th grade academy and something like K-8, for example, is that the 6th grade academy does not really break up the 6 through 8 educational cycle or grouping that we have as we face off to the state, which is a K through 5, 6 through 8, 9 through 12. And so, what we teach in 6th grade will not change. And then I get all the questions about if you split them up, what about the pullouts, what about all the extracurriculars? It's all doable. The question is, if I'd rather have 2 middle schools, and yeah, the numbers are there for 2 middle schools, and so, I can argue all day that 2 middle schools are better than this, and then I can go to the person who will tell you that this framework is better than 2 middle schools. I've got a 2-hour bus ride, and that takes 2 hours a day. There are no 2-hour bus rides on our bus routes in the city. Let me make it perfectly clear. We have modeled some of this, and the best we can get out of modeling is an hour and 10 minutes in the very worst set of conditions. If you want to know how long kids stay on a bus in this city, middle schoolers on average around this city, the average ride time is 13.4 minutes in the morning and 17.9 minutes in the afternoon. That's, of course, an average for the city, and of course, this will not be average, it'll be aberrative. All of these problems are solvable. We're not breaking any new ground here. It's all about preference. If you look at how far people will travel in this city, you know what? For a quality education, they'll travel as long and as necessary as they need to get a quality education. They won't want to walk across the street for an inferior education. And so, again, our view is to make it quality everywhere.
Thank you, ma'am.
Yes, I totally agree with you about making quality everywhere. My name is Sally Alcock. I'm a longtime Kirkwood neighbor. I'm a Toomer Elementary School parent, and I'm a future Cohen Middle School parent. First off, I know that you said that you couldn't see the signs in the back, but I just wanted to recognize all the Cohen Middle School students. They marched here today from Cohen Middle School all the way to Jackson, so they're probably very thirsty and very tired right now. And also, can all the Cohen supporters stand up?
Ma'am,
all the people here? I guess that I was one of the three people who attended the Board of Education Budget Committee meeting yesterday, and that was very enlightening. I thought it was very sobering when the CFO basically presented the projections for next year, the years 2013 through years 2017, and essentially, unfortunately, operating in a deficit. Basically, what he outlined, it looked like no pay increases, no step increases. Of course, like everyone here has to suffer higher health insurance costs.
Ma'am, you're going to make me be mean. You got to get to the question. Look at the people behind you. Please get to your question.
I will get to the question. Saving money. Don't you think that utilizing an existing middle school in the SRT-3, such as Cohen Middle School, which is fully functioning, is readily available, would be a great cost savings and just a logical solution for APS to relieve the overcrowding in SRT-3? We are in SRT-3. We are currently members of the Grady cluster, and due to our financial situation, don't you think that that would be a great consideration and just a logical choice to use Cohen Middle School as a solution to solve a lot of the problems within SRT-3?
I'm not sure how you would want to configure this to solve all of our problems, but again, if the school were to be closed, I know what I would get out of that. And I originally suggested that if this building is no longer used for Cohen, it could be repurposed and it could be used as a sixth grade academy. That was met with universal disdain, both by people at Cohen and the neighborhoods around Cohen, as well as the people who what I suggested to come here. So that dog did not hunt very well. But I will still say to you that, again, if we were to do that, I could avoid expansions elsewhere in the Grady cluster and spending money for that. If I were to build a new middle school or a second middle school or a sixth grade academy from scratch, we're talking $20 to $25 million, which could be avoided by, again, using this building, unpopular as that, in fact, might be. But you could come up with any number of scenarios to populate a building. And I've heard any number of suggestions, but few of those suggestions have been along the lines of, here's a way within our community to solve our issues, as opposed to, I think I've got a suggestion for another community to help us. If I were to take a clean sheet of paper and start from scratch, I would probably have a very different set of recommendations than I have now. But one of the things I was trying to do is, to the extent possible, to minimize cluster upsets. Now, clearly, if you're a Cohen parent or student, I haven't succeeded in that objective, but I don't think I want to compound it by having others share the pain in this as well. And so again, there's a lot of considerations, and I assure you we looked at a lot of them, and this is what I recommend at the moment.
All right, thank you, ma'am. We're going to move to the left side, and Mr. Superintendent, I'll remind you that those items you have listed, if you want to go over those, that would be helpful. I guarantee you it'll probably cut down the lines in terms of the questions. We're going to get to your questions. So each opportunity you have, you are welcome to go down that list.
Yes, hi.
Yes, ma'am, your question.
Yes, thanks. My name is Jessica Wagner. I live across the street from Grady High School. Grady and Inman are forecasted to grow or be stable. The demographers suggest any increase in capacity for both of those schools because of site constraints. Inman is 4.5 acres, which is basically the school and the parking lot, and Grady is landlocked. Do you have any suggestions on or thoughts about expanding capacity at those two schools? Have you looked at those possibilities?
Grady at the moment has a fixed capacity of 1,275 with the trailers and portables there. It's a little over 1,500 with the redistricting changes that we have made. The highest number that is forecast is slightly above 1,400. And of course, as I said earlier, this is the incorrect number. But what we really want to keep an eye on is Inman, not on Grady. There's a lot of discussions about Grady, and really from our perspective and looking at the numbers, the issue is never with Grady. The issue is with Inman. In the simplest sense, Grady will never be overcrowded if the 8th grade class at Inman is equal to or less than 1/4 of the capacity of Grady. Because it's a school where a high percentage graduate, where there's little fall off between the years, and so what we can do is keep our eye on the 8th grade class. In 2017, the 8th grade class in Inman is forecasted to be 413. If I go 4 times 413, then I have a problem at Grady in 2017, 2018. And so what I have to do is I'm not going to make a build, and that's at planning capacity levels. And so I'm not going to make a build decision today based on a 100-student overage in 2018. Now, that also implies that we will clean up Grady from all the students who shouldn't be there. We will work to migrate. And so, again, if we do that, we don't see great problems at Grady. These numbers will be posted. You will obviously get a lot of feedback to tell me where we're wrong on these, but we don't see a great problem at the moment, and we don't see a real beginning of a problem until about 2018. Inman is projected to grow consistently, and 2018, of course, is 6 years from now in a 10-year cycle, so I'm not motivated to make significant changes based on a projection that I know is going to be wrong 6 years from now.
Thank you, ma'am. We'll move to the young lady on the right.
Thank you for saying that I'm young.
It's all relative, you are.
First off, I'd like to say keep going open. But I have 2 questions.
I did hear a question.
One is very easy, yes or no, and the second one is more involved. But the first question is, will King Middle have a Mandarin Chinese program like Cohen currently does through the Confucius Institute?
That was someone else that said no. I thought I had head down on it. I don't know. It certainly is possible. This decision hasn't been made yet on whether it should have one. I think that's something that's a decision that Ms. Walden will have to make if this decision is in fact made by the board to move students and or programs from Cohen to King. Let me take this opportunity, and I know I'm not reading about in school, again to make one point which I do get in a lot of the questions, which is, can you give us more detail, and have you planned to do this, plan to do that, or, my God, it's impossible to get this done in a short period of time. One, these are proposals And so we are not going to do full-blown planning, implementation planning for proposals that are changing on a month-to-month basis. We will wait for the decision to be made, and we will try and give as much information as we can prior to that decision, and then we'll do planning. Now, having said that, I often get there is no way you can do this in a reasonable time frame. That's a pretty common statement that I get. From your perspective, or the perspective of most of the people here, that you haven't been through a school closure, you appreciate its complexity, and certainly I can understand the view that this is so complex that you can't possibly do this in a short period of time. The answer is yes, we can. We've closed 10 schools since 1998. We have a closure manual, which I've asked to be put online. It's about that big. It details what every department we have is supposed to do in times of school closure. So we've done this. It's scripted already. It's independent of a school, but there are certainly things such as specific programs that can be accommodated. So all of the thinking that goes into the closing of a school, we do not have to do that from scratch. We've done it before, and we have school closure protocols that deal with every department you can think of, whether it's personnel, whether it's programs, whether it's teachers, whether it's transportation, whether it's special needs. It's all in there, and I've asked that that be put online so people can look at it and, of course, tell us what's missing.
Well, now, how specifically will the children from Cohen, not just any school, but Cohen, have at least the same or hopefully a better outcome at King, which was just put on the state focus list for low academic performance, and Cohen was not? Considering many will not be able to participate, considering many will not be able...
Start your question over your fans interrupted it. I didn't hear it.
How specifically will the children from Cohen, not just any school, but Cohen, have at least the same or hopefully a better outcome at King, which was just put on the state focus list for low academic performance, and Cohen was not, considering many will not be able to participate in any after-school activities because they will not have a ride home, keeping in mind they have many after-school activities they can walk home from now, provided by all the outside support at Cohen that most likely will not follow them to King.
Oh, okay. Great question. That's obviously reflected in the rousing applause that we got. One, I don't accept some of the premises that people will not have time, and that may be based on a 2-hour bus ride.
No, I'm talking about after-school activities.
Yes, I'm talking about there are after-school activities, in-school activities. What we are, let me get back to one, I think the unfortunately pejorative characterization between the performance of Cohen and the performance of King. And if you go to other metrics, CRCT scores, for example, you'll find that the math scores are higher there than they are in Cohen. If you look at the frequency of making annual AYP, annual yearly progress, King has been more successful than Cohen in that regard. But, the schools are not dramatically different in terms of quality. I believe they're reasonably comparable in terms of quality. And so, again, I want to get past this. We're going from a great school or a much better school to a lesser school, because that is just not the case from a comparison perspective. Now, having said that, we do have plans for King. The same types of plans that we have for Maynard Jackson. We will be making architectural improvements there. I don't like the architecture. I can't find anyone who does other than the person who built the building, and they have gone underground at the moment. We're talking about putting in, extending the IB program into King as well as into Maynard Jackson, so that the feeder into Jackson has the IB program as well. We're talking about making the process improvement programs that we've done here and continue to do here, and putting those in there as well. And as we look at and repurpose all of these schools, particularly those with interim principals, whether it's King or whether it's other schools, we're also taking a real hard look at, do we have the leaders to take us to the level that we want us to go to? And so, again, I don't know whether a particular program will follow. That's Ms. Walden's going to do that, but I do know that we have a commitment to make sure, as someone said earlier, that we have quality schools at every location in every cluster, and that's the best I can do.
But are you considering a busing program for after-school activities?
Say again?
Are you considering a busing program for after-school activities where if they participate,
yeah,
they can then be bused home?
We have kids who have after-school activities in places like Sutton, where we have second buses, things like that, that take them home after they have sports activities or other types of activities. So we've dealt with these issues.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. We appreciate your question. We'll move to my left. If you would please, your question. And let me also take this opportunity too, just in terms of, again, to help us move forward. Dr. Davis, Mr. Davis knows that you all appreciate him being here, etc. So if you could limit the kind remarks and just get to your question, that would be really appreciated.
Well, hello, Superintendent Davis Jr. I have a question, and it's simple. Are your plans, this is a yay or nay question. Are your plans to close the schools, our children that are displaced by the closed schools, are your plans is to relocate them in areas outside of the community when the neighboring schools are overcrowded, to send them in schools that are outside the school zone?
The plans for, if you're talking about Cohen, again,
not particularly Cohen. It's not a school.
Again, I'm not sure I quite understand your question. Obviously, the cluster, the Inman-Grady cluster, does not cover Cohen, and the suggestion that Cohen be used for that cluster, as I mentioned earlier, was met with universal disdain by both sides of that. So we are looking for other options there. And the learning there is people want to stay within their cluster until you pick a new location, in which point you said that isn't very acceptable either, or maybe I want to rethink it from the first suggestion. But in general, we would like all the movement to be within a cluster as defined by the clusters that we put up on the web.
So as a parent, am I to predict that in the future there will be further school closings every time the school system is over budget?
If your question is that will there be school closings every time we have a budget challenge, you should just assume that is one tool we have at our disposal. But these changes are not made because of cost savings. The cluster models that we're putting in place, we also believe will substantially enhance educational quality, and we're also trying to bring support services to areas that do not presently have those support services. One of the things that we are committed to do, for example, is to put an assistant principal into every school and to help the principals at those schools. And so, again, we will do what we have to do. I wish we had more money than we do have, but we will deal with the realities of what we do have.
As we move to the gentleman to my right, Mr. Davis has referred a few times to Ms. Walden. That would be Karen Walden, who is our new Deputy Superintendent of Curriculum and Instruction. She's been here approximately 6 months or so. She's our Chief Academic Officer, so that is the reference to Ms. Walden with regard to curriculum issues. Also like to recognize Ms. Yolanda Johnson, who has joined us, one of our other board members. Please be recognized. Thank you, Ms. Johnson. Yes, sir.
Hello, my name is Dan Southern. I'm from the Grand Park neighborhood. Shifting focus a little bit, but I just wanted to ask if there are any current plans or maybe some proposals out there that would include the rest of the Grand Park neighborhood in the Parkside Elementary School District. One of the goals of the Grand Park neighborhood was, just so we could, obviously have our community and try to feed all of that into Parkside Elementary. We'll just open it up to you and see if that's any.
Yeah. After this was initially announced, we've got a lot of comments about neighborhood integrity and about where we should be drawing lines. In fact, when I came in here this evening, I received a proposal to redraw some lines, and we are going through those proposals and suggestions in great detail. We are meeting for about 4 to 5 hours every week reviewing the suggestions. What we have decided to do is not prematurely make any judgments on these suggestions until we have them all and can make some judgments in total. But again, with respect to Grant Park, we are sensitive to Grant Park as it is presently zoned. It is not zoned as a community within a cluster, and that is in fact on our radar and has been a topic of discussion, and we will either make some changes or tell you why that we will not, but that has been suggested to us.
Fantastic, thank you. Good luck and Godspeed.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am, your question, please.
Hello, Superintendent Davis. My name is Karen Kelly. I'm a Lynn and Inman parent. I'm also the Director of Exhibits and Education at the Children's Museum of Atlanta, and we work with 4 inner-city schools. I had a question about the Howard Building. As a museum person and in my career, we work with public and private partnerships, and I was wondering if you all would be open to a conversation to look at the amount of money it would cost to repurpose the Howard Building and work with us to find private funding for that repurposing.
Well, as I mentioned in my earlier remarks, we are certainly aware of the Howard building. We have a reasonable idea of how much it will cost to refurbish. Our ability to tear it down and build new on that spot is somewhat restricted by the historical significance of the building. As we look at the growth in Inman, we are going to have a site somewhere. We cannot architecturally accommodate growth that we see at Inman. And so when we say this, we will then, of course, join the argument about whether there should be 2 middle schools or whether there should be 1 6th grade academy and just 1 middle school. And, we heard the pros and cons of that, because that debate took place first in SRT-3, and they're pretty vocal about putting their issues on the table. In terms of whether we would be willing to work to seek outside support, absolutely. We believe very strongly that the secret to success is other people's money instead of our own, and so we are not yet at a point where we want to make a particular decision about that building.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for your question, ma'am. And before we move to the next question, we have been joined by Courtney English, who is also a board member at the Thank you, Mr. English. A few more and we'll have a full board.
Yeah, let me say we've got about 5 minutes, not before we're going to leave, of course, but before we're going to cap the line. And so I just want to let people know in advance that at 8 o'clock we're going to put an end to the line and make sure we work through all of the questions of the people that are in line at the moment. So I'm certainly not encouraging people to get in line, but I want you to be aware of that, so you don't say you didn't help me. I didn't make sure. Yes, sir.
Gentlemen, and I have met.
I hope you had a pleasant interaction.
He's answering the question tonight.
I have some for you, but I'll ask you a bit. My name is Greg Wilkinson. I live in Kirkwood. I've been there 13 years now. I have a couple quick questions. One, you talk about cluster stability. Being in Kirkwood for the last 13 years, we've lost our high school. We have Eastlake that's losing their elementary school, and you're proposing taking our middle school and kicking us out of Grady High School. How is that cluster stability? We're trying to understand that one. But the second point is, you know the history regarding charter schools in the city of Atlanta. Can you tell me like how many charter schools there are?
We have 14.
You have 14. Did you know that 6 of those 14 schools are in Southeast Atlanta? They're in this quadrant of the city. And that is because of historic neglect by APS in providing a quality education in these schools. And if you want to talk about enrollment numbers, we have about 2,400 kids in Southeast Atlanta in these charter schools that you have lost because you didn't provide a good education. So the question is, what are you going to do for our cluster stability? And what are you going to do for the residents of all communities in Southeast Atlanta to help better our schools that we have now and stop closing?
Again, that is an excellent question. I'm certainly not a student of history, and that's sometimes a good thing and sometimes a bad thing, because I don't carry a particular level of guilt for what went on in the past, and I'm trying to deal with the realities of what I have to deal with today. Rightly or wrongly, we are where we are. And we are with 300 students in a 900-seat school. And I am not persuaded necessarily by history to say it's okay to do that when I am trying to find really both all of the dollars that I can find and also to concentrate resources so we can provide better education. And so what I have suggested to people who have come to me about Cohen is that you know your community much better than I. You tell me what I need to do to make this school viable, to make more than 54.5%.
Really? You want our opinion. We will give it to you. We want you to invest the resources and the energy in that school.
I ask that you send those things in as opposed to just saying keep it open.
That's not what I said.
Okay.
I'm being clear. You have neglected, APS has neglected that school along with numerous schools in our area, not just Cone. I'm talking about all of Southeast Atlanta. We just happen to be dealing with Cone right now. Your plan is, let's close it, let's get rid of it. Why don't you use it? Stop the overcrowding up north, break the historic lines, bring some people in, let's drive the school in the right direction. I'm not trying to tell them any reversal. You're saving money by not building something. You're investing in a new
I appreciate what you were saying. And as I've said earlier, that I'm looking for community solutions that say something different than I want another community to come in and share my problems.
Stop letting the charter schools invest in our schools. Invest in our schools. If you look, 60% of all the charter students in the entire city are right here in this area. Why? Why has it happened? Why does it fail? Why does it continue to fail? It just keeps getting pushed down the line, more schools close, people go to more charter schools, and the process keeps going over and over and over.
Yeah, again, I hear what you're saying. In the back of my mind, however, there's another statement, and it is this, rightly or wrongly, again, because I wasn't here, I don't know the history. But I asked myself the question that if I had on a consistent basis the kind of passion, the kind of intensity, the kind of ownership that I am now seeing, if that had been sustained over the years, would we be where we are today? And so I am not I am impressed by what I see. I welcome what I see, but I also have to ask myself, if this had been, the level of intensity and ownership had been here before I suggested this, you know, and I will be very clear, what I have seen out of this community in this demographic process, first is a suggestion for a K-8 school at Toomer, which would itself have harmed Cohen even more. And so, you know, I don't see, I see passion, intensity, ownership now. I haven't seen it before. But, you know, I don't want to penalize anybody for me not having seen it, but I just want to give you the perspective as I do planning, what I have seen. Now, I said this is preliminary. I've said, show me a path, show me a way where there are things that I can do here within this cluster to make it more attractive.
We're in the grading cluster. We're in the grading cluster. We're being kicked out. We're talking about this cluster. Everyone keeps forgetting that. That's the point here. We're in the grading cluster. We're being tossed out of. So what are we talking about? Jackson or Grady? Jackson or Grady? Which one?
Again, you know, your view of being in the grading cluster, that it was a Toomer to Cohen to Grady, which was, from my perspective, a split high school cluster. It wasn't a consistent high school pattern. The suggestion that I have made creates a consistent high school pattern in terms of if Cohen is in the middle here, we have a grade school going to the middle school, going to the same high school, as opposed to part of the students coming into Cohen, going to Grady, part of the students coming into Cohen, going to somewhere else. And so, again, I believe, rightly or wrongly, that a consistent feeder pattern is the best, and that's what I'm suggesting.
Greg, thank you. We're going to move to the 11.
I just want to thank him for leading up to my questions brilliantly. So
don't ask the same.
It is not the same one. So just speaking of, you know, you spoke quite frequently about how you feel about the importance of whole clusters, you know, feeding into a high school, and how that's worked in the North Atlanta and in the Grady system, in those clusters, and how you want to incorporate that everywhere else. But I think most of what everyone here sees, what's common to those two areas, is money. And I'd like to, my first question is, how do you think that Grady, just this week being added to the focus group for the focus group by the state, because of a split of, I guess it was added to the focus group because there seemed to be a big split between succeeding students and failing students, and how that speaks to your cluster idea.
Yeah, I'm not sure Chuck of any question. I really don't.
So Grady was added to the state's focus group of schools to be focused on. It was in the paper.
So if I could prompt you to then.
Yeah, well, I mean, he's asking a question. I don't know that.
It was in the paper. The state, like Grady.
I don't remember Grady.
It was today.
It was today. It was today. It was today in the paper that Grady is a member of the group of schools that the state grouped into the focus group, and the reasons for being in the focus group were either, you know, you underperform at a certain point, or you have a big diversity of kids succeeding and kids failing, and Grady was put on that list.
Okay. Again, that is new data that I haven't seen, and that's clearly an internal Grady issue, which must be and should be addressed. These categorizations are often challenging. If you look at No Child Left Behind and AYP, what you found under that is the highest performing schools often did not meet AYP, because AYP required you to make 10% improvements in a number of factors every year, and if you were already at a high level, it was very difficult to make AYP. And so you take a state like Massachusetts, which is known to have really the best K-12 system in the country, and they had a substantial number of students a substantial number of schools that didn't make AYP because they were performing at such a high level. I really don't know the basis on which these categorizations have been made. I'm not sure that it really impacts so much the directions we go or what we want to do in our educational direction. But again, if it just came out today, we'll have to look at it and see what it means, and we'll have to address it.
Well, the point I was trying to make is that the state identified it because there seems to be a demarcation point in Grady between kids doing really well and kids doing poorly. And yes, you're aware of that at least, right? And that's why it was put on the list.
Yeah, we have, that's frequently an issue, and Ms. Walden, whose name I continue to draw continuously, has pointed out that type of problem and how we avoid that type of problem. I mean, we used to have within schools tracking where we had low tracks and high tracks, and we try and do away with those types of things.
Do you know how those break down demographically?
Say that?
Do you know how those break down demographically?
No, I do not at this point.
Thank you, sir. We're going to move to my right, and yes, ma'am, if you would finish, step and ask your question, please.
Yes. My name is Cindy Smith, and I am a parent of 2 at Cohen and a parent of 1 at Grady. Very involved, very vocal parent. So, I believe I saw you this morning being very vocal at the radio station. So I have a comment, and it's based on what you've been saying more than once this evening. You have said many times that we cannot solve our problem in our community by inviting another community in to help solve that problem. But I think you opened that door when you proposed taking Cohen Middle School and bringing another community in. That's exactly what it is. You opened that door. That's why you did the proposal. That's why you did the question. That's why you're getting, let's do this, let's do that. You're getting that because the door was open. So you have to be, once you open that door, then you have to be ready for what comes with it. So I just want to make that clear. My question is, I have 3 that are being affected. I have Cohen, going to King. I have Grady right now, where do we go? And I have an 8th grader that would be coming to Jackson. Can you give some insight on students that are coming into Jackson that won't actually be here? What's that going to look like for my child? Where are they traveling? Where are they going? What is that day going to look like for them?
For those who don't know, this school is scheduled to be closed and refurbished at a cost of about $40 million, as well as additional programs. And when it opens, it will open with new leadership and potentially a lot of new different faculty as well, depending upon the faculty's ability to meet the IB standards and to teach it appropriately. So there will be a lot of changes here at this school. Where will it be next year? That has not been decided. We do have one site that is prepped for high schools. That is the old Archer School. No one wants to go there. I understand that. And so, again, there are a number, I mentioned earlier, middle schools that are being recommended for closure that can, with some minor modification, accommodate high school students for a 1-year period. But that decision will not be made until after the board makes its decision on which schools can be, should be, or can be closed, and in what time frames. And once I get that information, I can then make a recommendation on where the students from this school should go.
I do thank you for coming out because we actually needed you last Friday and we need you this Friday at Cohen.
Well, yes, ma'am.
Hi, I'm Kristen Sullivan. I live in the Cabbagetown neighborhood. Just as a reminder, Cabbagetown has been advocating to be zoned Parkside Elementary. We're a tiny neighborhood. We have 4 rising kindergartners, one of whom is already enrolled at Drew Charter School. So with those numbers, we are not going to be able to make a huge impact on the under-enrollment at Whiteford, nor will we push Parkside over their enrollment capacity, especially since almost half of the kids there now are transfers. And to my knowledge, there's been really no neighborhoods or anyone vocally opposed to including Cabbagetown and Parkside. So my question is, since we've made these points in many forums, there's even been some graffiti involved, why did you recommend us being zoned to Whiteford, and why can't you accommodate our request to go to Parkside?
Let me say first that our rezoning is not based on request. It is based on where we think it's appropriate for the children to go, and then we put that down, and then we get the request.
So I guess why is it not? Why was it deemed not appropriate for Cabbagetown to go to Parkside?
I probably can't answer that right here, but I know everybody wants to go to Parkside, and so you know, if I granted everybody's request, but you know, your answer then is there's only 4 of us, and so we wouldn't have impact, but you'd probably have impact far beyond 4, because then I get every other community saying, but you let them go because they requested it. I know that's a little concern to you, because you would have achieved what you believe is best for your child. And the unfortunate reality is I've got to figure out what's best for 47,000, at least from my perspective. And so, again, I don't have a good answer for your question. What I can say is we certainly will take that down, and in our weekly discussions, we'll take another look at it.
Thank you, I appreciate it.
Yes, sir, your question.
Good evening, gentlemen. My name is Doug Williams from Eastlake. I'd like to congratulate whoever came up with the term cluster. That is the best term for what you're doing in my community. What I consistently see from you guys is a pattern of blaming the victim. What I consistently see from y'all is a pattern of blaming the victim.